I remember the exact moment he walked in, the way his hand held his side, fingers pressed just a little too tightly against the fabric of his shirt. My son Martin, 24 years old, and already carrying the weight of too much disappointment. He'd always been strong physically so, but when I saw that faint crease in his brow, the kind of worry lines that weren't just about pain, I knew this wasn't just about his abdomen. Lower right side, he said, easing down on the exam table with a wince. Been feeling it since yesterday. Kind of dull, but it comes and goes. His voice was casual, but I could hear the fatigue tucked into the syllables. I worked at the hospital, 23 years as a diagnostic ultrasound technician. I'd seen it all, cysts, stones, inflammation, even things far more terrifying. But with Martin, I found myself triple-checking everything, second-guessing what I knew by instinct. I applied the gel and picked up the transducer. His abdomen was warm beneath the probe, his skin familiar. I tried not to let that familiarity affect my judgment. I studied the monitor carefully. The machine hummed, revealing layers of soft tissue, the slight flicker of vascular flow, a rhythmic harmony of organs that, to my eye, looked entirely normal. No appendiceal inflammation, no lymphadenopathy, no herniation, just healthy tissue. I adjusted the gain, zoomed in on the iliac fossa, even moved down toward the bladder and pelvic cavity just to be thorough. Everything looks fine, I said softly. More than fine. Nothing abnormal at all. Martin blinked up at me. His lashes were long, something he'd gotten from his father, along with that tendency to hold everything inside until it calcified into silence. So, what's causing the pain? I hesitated. Could be muscular strain. Maybe gastrointestinal. Doesn't look like appendicitis. Have you been eating normally? Not really, he admitted. Stress, I guess. Things have been off lately. That much I knew. Martin had moved out a year ago, claiming he needed space, needed to figure things out. I never asked too many questions. I didn't want to be the kind of mother who hovered. But I missed him. Every evening was quieter now. The echo of his absence filled the house in strange ways. Through the empty cereal bowl he used to leave in the sink, through the sound of his music that no longer slipped under his door. He sat up slowly, wiping the gel off with a paper towel. His shirt still crumpled in one hand. His ribs shifted slightly as he moved. There again a flinch. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. "You're sure there's nothing wrong?" he asked, his tone careful. "I can only speak to what I see," I said gently, though the words felt inadequate. "But no, nothing alarming." I wanted to reach out, to place a hand on his shoulder, but something held me back. He wasn't a boy anymore. "Maybe I'm just going crazy," he muttered, sliding off the table. "You're not," I said firmly, too quickly. He looked up at me, surprised by the intensity in my voice. Our eyes met, and for a moment there was something, some old familiarity, some undercurrent of connection that never really left, no matter how many months or miles stretched between us. Over the next few days, the pain didn't go away. Martin texted once. "Still hurts. Not bad, just there." I told him to come back. I reran the scan. Still nothing. Still perfectly clear. But he looked more tired this time. The shadows beneath his eyes had deepened, and he'd lost a bit of weight. I tried to dismiss the gnawing in my gut, the voice that whispered that maybe this wasn't about anatomy at all, that maybe it was something else, that maybe, somehow, it had to do with me. It was my idea for him to move back. I masked it in concern, motherly instinct, professional curiosity, but beneath it was something quieter, harder to name. A pull I hadn't expected. "You should stay here," I told him that evening after the second inconclusive scan. "Just for a little while. Let me take care of you." Martin didn't argue. He looked up from the table, eyes tired but soft, and nodded. "Yeah, maybe I need that." I told myself I was doing what any good mother would do. Feeding him, making sure he slept through the night, gently nudging him into the kind of routine that soothes restlessness. I started cooking again, real meals. Grilled chicken and steamed vegetables. Lentil soup and fresh bread. Eggs in the morning, chamomile tea at night. His appetite returned. The color returned to his cheeks. He started laughing again. And God help me, I started waiting for his footsteps on the stairs. For the sound of the refrigerator opening. For the low murmur of his voice when he asked me if I'd seen his jacket or if there was any more of that soup left. It was in the ordinary moments that I began to feel it. How much space he filled. How much I had missed the way he made the house feel alive. Then the canyon. "You need air," I told him one morning as we sipped coffee by the window. "Real air. Not hospital white light and city noise." He raised an eyebrow. "You mean like trees and rocks?" I laughed. "Yes, and wind that doesn't carry car exhaust." I'd read somewhere that the canyon was best this time of year, just before the full rush of summer. Still green, still quiet. The only way there was by train. I booked our tickets that afternoon. When the day came, we packed light. Just 2 backpacks, snacks, books we wouldn't open. He carried both bags anyway, tossing mine over his shoulder like it weighed nothing. I watched his profile as we waited on the platform. How much he'd changed in the last few years, and how much of the boy I once raised still lingered in the shape of his smile. The train was nearly empty. It rumbled into the station like something out of a dream. Slow, steady, elegant in its age. We boarded and found ourselves alone in one of the last carriages. Long stretches of padded seats facing each other. A narrow aisle in between. Martin collapsed onto a bench with a sigh. "Feels like a movie set," he said, glancing around. "It does," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. The train pulled away with a groan, and the rhythm of the tracks began to hum beneath us. We talked, lightly at first, about the hospital, the news, the absurdity of ticket prices. I offered him a sandwich. He offered me his chocolate bar in return. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes for a moment, and I just watched him. That warmth I couldn't quite explain had returned, stretching out between us like a thin thread of light. It wasn't inappropriate, no. Not in any way I could articulate. But it was intimate, quiet, present. The sun spilled through the windows, bathing everything in gold. Somewhere past the halfway point, the train began to slow. There was no station, just a turn in the tracks, a view that opened wide onto the valley, and a stillness that made you forget where you were. "I forgot how good it feels to not rush," Martin said, his voice low. He turned to me then, really turned, not just his face but his whole attention. And there it was again, that warmth. A softness in his gaze I hadn't seen in years. As if something in him had let go. "I don't know what's happening to me," he admitted. "But whatever it is, it feels lighter when I'm here. With me. With all of it," he said, and then, more quietly. "But yeah, you especially." I looked away then. Out the window. At the blur of pines and hills and the open sky. "I don't think it's your stomach," I said after a long pause. "I think it's everything else. All the pressure. The disappointment. Not knowing what comes next." He didn't answer. But his silence was full. The train gave a gentle lurch, and we shifted in our seats. My hand brushed his on the table between us. Just barely, just a whisper of contact, but neither of us moved away. The air felt warmer after that. Not stifling. Not wrong. Just heavier. As if the space between us had taken on a presence of its own. He turned his palm up, slowly, deliberately. And without quite knowing why, I let my fingers rest in his. Just for a moment, neither of us spoke. The train rattled on, a steady sound in a world gone very quiet. I told myself it was nothing. A gesture between two people who had grown too used to absence. A reminder of closeness. But part of me knew better. Something had shifted, and it would not shift back. After the canyon trip, things didn't go back to how they were. Martin stayed just like we'd planned. But the house felt different now, as if it had taken a deep breath and was holding it, waiting. The quiet moments were heavier, as though they carried the memory of his hand in mine. The smallest things made my heart race. The sound of his bare feet coming down the hall, the brush of his shoulder as he passed behind me in the kitchen, the way he said my name when he called to me from another room. Not Mom, just Diana. It was such a little thing. And yet I heard it every time. I didn't ask him to stop. I didn't remind him who I was to him. I told myself it was nothing, just a slip. A grown man testing boundaries with the woman who'd raised him, now rediscovering her in a different light. We hadn't lived under the same roof for over a year. We were strangers in familiar bodies. That's what I kept telling myself. But there were moments when I caught him looking at me differently. Not as a son looks at a mother, but as a man looks at someone he doesn't want to stop seeing. And God forgive me, I didn't look away. One night, about a week after our return, I was folding laundry in the living room, and Martin came in barefoot, wearing a white t-shirt and soft gray sweats, hair still damp from a shower. He dropped onto the couch next to me, close. Too close for it to mean nothing. The air between us stirred, and my hands trembled slightly as I kept folding a towel. "Need help?" he asked, watching my fingers more than the fabric. "I've got it," I said, my voice a little too quiet. He didn't move. Just sat there, shoulder brushing mine, eyes still on the towel in my lap like it held a secret he couldn't name. "You always used to fold the towels like this," he said. "I remember watching you when I was little. I'd sit at the table and pretend I wasn't looking." "Why pretend?" I asked, trying to keep the mood light. He shrugged, then said, "You always looked so calm when you did it. Like the world made sense, just for a second." I didn't know what to say to that. The truth was, it hadn't made sense for a long time. Not since his father left. Not since I'd learned how to carry everything on my own. Not since Martin grew into someone I didn't recognize. He leaned back then, just slightly. But his hand was still resting near mine. I could feel the heat of him, steady, grounding. And then his voice broke the silence again. "I never felt as safe anywhere else as I do in this house." His words landed softly but deeply. "You made it safe," he added. "Not the walls. You." I turned to look at him. The honesty in his expression undid something inside me. I saw the man he had become, but I also saw the boy. The one who used to curl into my side during thunderstorms, who brought me dandelions in the spring, who'd once fallen asleep holding my hand in the ER after scraping his knee worse than he could handle. And now here he was beside me, gazing at me not with nostalgia or dependency, but with presence. I rose to take the laundry basket away before I said something I couldn't take back. But as I turned, he reached out and gently touched my wrist. "Diana." Froze. "I don't want to leave yet," he said. "Even when I'm better. I don't want to go back to that apartment. To that version of me." I swallowed hard. "You don't have to." The words came out faster than I meant them to. His fingers loosened but didn't let go. "You say that like you mean it," he murmured. "I do." The air shifted again. He stood then, slowly giving me space. Or maybe giving himself time. "I'm going to bed," he said finally, his voice low. I nodded, still not meeting his eyes. "Good night." "Good night, Diana." When I heard his door close, I stood there a long time in the hallway, holding a folded towel to my chest like it could protect me from the storm I could feel building inside. It wasn't just that he was staying. It was that part of me wanted him to. It was the night of the first heavy summer rain. One of those nights where the air thickens with the scent of wet pavement and everything outside feels half asleep. The house was quiet. Martin had gone for a walk earlier, said he needed air. I didn't ask where. Lately I didn't ask much at all. I had grown afraid of the answers I might get. I sat on the back porch under the awning, cradling a mug of tea I hadn't touched. The storm had started softly, tapping the roof like fingertips, but it grew heavier by the minute. I let it drown out the thoughts that never left me. My mind was full of things I couldn't say, and worse, things I had started to feel. He returned just after midnight. His shirt clung to him from the rain, and his hair was damp and curling at the edges. He looked younger like that, softer. But the way he looked at me, when he stepped through the door and met my eyes, that was not the look of a boy. "You should have called," I said, standing quickly, worry rising like heat from my skin. "You're soaked." "I didn't want to wake you," he replied, his voice low. "But I saw the light." I moved toward the kitchen. "Let me get you a towel." "Diana." "Stop." He said my name like it mattered. Like it held something between us that neither of us wanted to admit out loud. I turned slowly, and he was standing in the middle of the room now, barefoot on the tile, water dripping from his sleeves. His eyes locked on mine. "This," he said, gesturing loosely at the room, the air, the silence. "It feels like something's happening. And I don't know what to do with it." I swallowed hard. My hands trembled slightly at my sides. "We've crossed a line," I said quietly. "I know. And we can't go back." He didn't respond right away. The storm outside gave no room for silence. It filled every gap between our words with thunder and wind. "But I don't want to go back," he said at last. I felt the breath catch in my throat. He stepped closer, slowly, as if giving me time to move away. I didn't. "I've tried to name it," he continued. "To call it comfort or nostalgia, or some messed up version of feeling lost. But it's not that. Not anymore. Martin. I know how this sounds," he said, his voice hoarse now, like it had cost him something to say it. But this, what we are when it's quiet, feels more real than anything I've had out there. I looked at him then. Really looked. His face was older now, yes. But I could still see the shape of the child he had been, the one I had held through fevers and heartbreak. But the man in front of me, the one who had learned how to cook the soup I used to make, who carried in the groceries without being asked, who noticed when I was tired and told me to rest, that man saw me. Not as a mother. Not as a figure in his past. But as something now. I should have stopped him. But I didn't. And he saw that. He took another step forward, slow and sure, until there was nothing between us but the ache of 1,000 unsaid things. "Can I?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. He nodded. His hand rose gently to my cheek, trembling slightly as his fingers traced the curve of my jaw. I closed my eyes, and for a second I wasn't Diane the mother. I wasn't Diane the technician, or the widow, or the one who always held things together. I was just someone who had been seen, and wanted. He leaned in and his lips met mine, not hungrily, not impulsively, but carefully, reverently, like he knew the weight of what he was doing. The kiss was soft, and impossibly quiet, and when we pulled apart he didn't say anything. Neither did I. We just stood there, breathing. Something had changed between us forever. I knew that. There was no guidebook for what came next. No protocol for two people who'd accidentally stepped beyond every line they were supposed to hold. But still he reached for my hand. And I let him. That night we sat together on the couch, not touching, not speaking much. Just watching the rain fall in sheets across the window, the storm lighting up the sky in flashes of silver. I rested my head on his shoulder, and he leaned into it. I didn't sleep. But I also didn't leave the room. He stayed for 3 more weeks. Eventually he moved back to his apartment. We never spoke of that night again. Not directly. But sometimes he calls me late just to say hello. Sometimes I hear that same hush in his voice, that same gentle pause before he says my name. And when he does, I feel it again. That warmth, that storm, that kiss. The ache of something unnameable and impossible. What pain cannot say. But hearts remember. Always.